Text, Jobcast by Indeed. Back to work, explaining an employment gap. Copyright 2020 Indeed Inc. All rights reserved.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the Jobcast. Today, we are discussing how to get back to work after an employment gap, whether you've been unemployed for 10 weeks or 10 years. I'm excited to introduce our guest speaker today, Jenifer Garey. Jenifer has over 25 years of nonprofit management and public administration experience. As Director of Workforce Development at Goodwill Columbus, she provides strategic and administrative leadership for all workforce training programs and personnel. And that's me, Brandy Warwis. I'm a manager on Indeed's Job Seeker Experience team. We're responsible for creating helpful resources like this Jobcast for our users, like you. Take it away, Jenifer.
Hi, everyone. As Brandy noted, my name is Jenifer Garey. I'm with Goodwill Columbus, and I'm excited to be a part of the Jobcast today. The most fulfilling part of my job is probably being able to connect with our clients who are job seekers. And ironically enough, over the course of the last 2 or 3 weeks, I've been a part of mock interviews. And so it's really given me an opportunity to be frontline and hear some great questions and provide some great feedback to our job seekers about how to explain their employment gaps. So I think it's really timely for me to have had that experience and to be able to join you today. So let's talk about our learning objectives. Today, we're going to be talking about your employment gap, formatting your resume around the gap, and then preparing to enter the workforce.
Text, the information presented in this webinar is provided as a courtesy, and any views and opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Indeed. It does not represent a forecast, prediction, or other indication of future market or economic performance, and should not be relied upon for such purposes. Indeed is not a career or legal advisor and does not guarantee job interviews or offers.
An employment gap is any time in which a person is not employed at a job. This period of time can be weeks, months, or even years, depending on the person's situation. People could have had an employment gap for a number of reasons, including going back to school, staying home with children, or even traveling. During the COVID-19 pandemic, more people than ever have lost their jobs as a direct result of the closure requirements that all non-essential employers have faced. This unprecedented time will result in millions of individuals having employment gaps on their resumes. So if you have a gap in employment history on your resume, the first thing to know, and one of the most important things, is you're not alone. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the vast majority of people, 90% in fact, have been unemployed at some point in their working age lives. Unemployment gaps in short-term jobs are common among working age people, and sometimes just an explanation laced in humility can serve you quite well. Based on Indeed research and interviews with employers, a gap on a resume is not a deal breaker if the candidate is qualified for the role. Life happens, and employers understand that. If you have a gap in your work history, just be prepared to talk about it in an honest yet professional way. Take the time beforehand to work out how you can address the gap in a way that projects confidence and positivity. You want to be truthful without getting into unnecessary detail. A basic template for your answer could be, and state the reason you were unemployed, and then talk about during that time what you did during the gap. The last statement could be, returning to work was top of mind during that period, and I'm ready to do that now. Having a prepared answer will help you feel more confident as you answer the question, but it also means that you're going to exude confidence, and that's going to impress the employer that you're a right fit for a job. So let's take a quick poll. What is your reason for an employment gap? Left to be a caregiver, laid off by your employer, fired from your job, took time off for personal reasons, laid off due to COVID-19, or other reasons?
And so it looks like 12% left to be a caregiver, 22% were laid off by your employer, 8% fired from your job, 16% took time off for personal reasons, and 23%, the largest, were laid off due to COVID-19, and 17% had other reasons.
I think these are pretty common answers, especially in the time that we're living in with a global pandemic. So let's go ahead and take a look at some other information. So some explanations in terms of your gap in employment. One could be that you left to be a caregiver for either children or aging parents. We have multiple life roles with competing priorities, and now you are making your career a priority. For example, you could say something to the effect of, I spent some time as the primary caregiver in my family. During that time, I was able to be there for my family, but I always knew I wanted to return to work. Now I'm ready to do that. It's very simple, it's very straightforward, but it's also brief. Another high ranking one was laid off by your employer. So it is important to keep a positive tone. It is common today for organizations to restructure. So for example, one answer could be, my former employer underwent a restructuring that resulted in my position being eliminated. While this was difficult, I left with the confidence that I had developed important skills there and built strong relationships with my managers and colleagues. Sometimes I think the easiest way to describe what we do at Goodwill and how we can help people explain those gaps in employment is by using examples. So Josh is a past client with Goodwill Columbus. He came to us in January of 2020. He had been laid off as a graphic designer, and he talked to our IT team about making a career change. Felt that he wanted to stay in IT, but wanted to do something that would allow him to work remotely and earn a better wage. He enrolled with our A+ credential class, and within 12 weeks had completed the course. As a result, he networked with employers. We used ourselves as references, and we connected with his other employers. We were able to help Josh get a job in Central Ohio with a leading employer, and he doubled his income, and he was able to work remotely to stay home with a young family. So Josh utilized all the resources at his fingertips and maintained a positive attitude, and also took an opportunity to upskill to start a new career. So kudos to Josh. It was wonderful working with him. So maybe you were let go by your employer. So you also could have taken that time to reflect upon how you could grow from the experience. For example, the company and I had different expectations in reflecting on that experience. I realized there are some things I could have done differently. I learned a great deal, and I'm excited about the opportunity to bring that maturity to my next job. So you were provided a very honest answer. You admitted that there had been a difference of expectations, but it was important that you noted a level of self-awareness. And that self-awareness is key in what you're bringing to your next employer. It's also possible to take time off for personal reasons. And during that time, engage in activities that provide opportunities for learning and growth. For example, your answer could be, I was able to take some time off work to focus on myself. It was a time that prepared me to take on new challenges, and I'm incredibly excited about the opportunities that lie ahead, such as this position. So you're exuding enthusiasm for the position that's open, and you're not providing too much detail. However, there are many reasons for taking time off. You could have taken time to travel, to care for family members, to remodel a home. But the important thing is to be concise in your answer, excited about the next opportunity, but also to share only the information you're comfortable with. Laid off to COVID-19, that's very common right now. It was one of the highest scores on the poll. So it's important to communicate resilience and determination to move forward. For example, my employer underwent a downsizing due to the impact of the coronavirus pandemic that resulted in my position being eliminated. It was difficult, but I left with the confidence that I had developed important skills there and built strong relationships with my managers and colleagues. Due to the unprecedented times that we live in, this is a very common conversation thread during interviews. It's a great time to provide a summary of skills that you have been able to acquire over the past years and even in your last position, and then how those can help you move forward in this new position that you're interviewing for. It's also a time to really think about maybe a career change. And so we have recently worked with my mom, who had been an executive assistant for 5 years, and really saw the connection between the skills that she had as an executive assistant and maybe something where she would have the opportunity to work remotely in a lead role as a customer service representative. So she took the time to take our work readiness training, work with our career consultants to find the right placement, and she's seeking that balance for herself. As her child is learning remotely at home, she would like the opportunity to be at home and help her child, but also working at the same time. So we're still working with her on finding the right fit, but it was a great time of discovery for her, and we were able to offer her the skills to make that move. In addition to knowing how to explain employment gaps, you should also know where to explain them. Indeed's research showed that employers generally agree that gaps will be discussed during the initial phone screening interview, but some prefer to see the gaps explained beforehand in the resume or cover letter. That way, they may be able to avoid judgment based on unanswered questions about the gaps. Explaining employment gaps in your cover letter and resume also shows recruiters and hiring managers that you are honest and trustworthy, which can help make you stand out from other candidates in the current pool. So let's talk about formatting your resume around an employment gap. Next, you need to determine whether your employment gap needs to be included on your resume. It is not always necessary to include every job you have had on your resume. If you are a professional who has several years of experience and your employment gap occurred early in your career, it may not be necessary in the job that you had before your gap in employment. Generally, you should only include your most recent and most relevant job experiences in the employment section of your resume. Once you determine which jobs you need to include in your resume, you can determine which employment gaps you need to explain. Next, if the gaps in your employment history are only small gaps that occurred in between jobs, you can downplay these gaps by omitting the month and the date of each experience. Instead, simply list the years you were employed in each position. However, this method of downplaying gaps in employment on your resume usually only works well if the length of the gaps are less than a year in length and you worked in each position for a period of more than 1 year. For example, if you were employed in one position from August 2015 through January 2017 and didn't begin your next job until 2017, you can downplay this employment gap by listing the dates of your last or your first job as 2015 to 2017 and subsequently the dates of your next job as 2017 to present. However, while this can help you with the initial consideration round with your resume, you will likely still be asked about specific questions or dates during the interview. So be prepared with an explanation for your gap in a positive manner. Next, you can also try to make employment gaps look less obvious by using a resume style or format, such as the functional resume format. A functional resume format focuses more on your skills and achievements than on your experience. You can include sections in your resume, such as career summary statement and key accomplishments, to help make the positive experiences you have the primary focus of your resume. Then include your employment section toward the end of your resume. If you look at the example on the screen, they do a great job of building that summary, the areas of experience, and then your skills, so that you can move down through the employer and just simply look at the year, but it really promotes your best foot forward by the skills that you've attained, certificates that you've earned, key areas of accomplishment. Again, putting yourself and the skills up front and make them more noticeable.
List the reason for longer gaps as its own job.
You will usually need to address longer periods of gap in employment more directly in your resume than you need to with small employment gaps. If you have an employment gap that was more than a period of 1 year, then this gap will still need to be obvious on your resume, even with only listing the years or when using a functional resume format. You can overcome this by including what you were doing during your employment gap in your experience section as if it were a job itself. However, you can keep the entry brief so it doesn't distract the person reviewing your resume from more relevant work experience. For example, if you spent 4 years as a stay-at-home parent until your child was ready for preschool, then you can include this time in your experience section like this: full-time parent, Atlanta, Georgia, 2008 through 2011, took time away from professional career to raise young children and manage the household. Again, relaying those organizational skills with a brief period or a brief explanation of the period of time is very helpful. If you can relate the experience you gained during your employment gap into the position you are applying for, then it may be beneficial to include more detailed information in your employment gap entry. You can include specific examples of daily activities and responsibilities you had during your employment gap that are relevant to the duties or responsibilities of the position you're applying for. For example, if you have an employment gap of 2 years because you took time off work to be a full-time caregiver for an elderly relative, and you were applying for a position as a nurse, the employment gap entry in your experience section may look a little more like this: full-time caregiver, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, 2017 to 2019. Took time away from professional career to act as a full-time caregiver to an elderly relative. assisted relative with daily tasks such as feeding, bathing, dressing, and grooming, administered medications as prescribed 3 times daily, checked vital signs on a regular basis to gauge recovery process. Again, what a great way to fill in the gap and explain what you were doing and relate those skills to the position you're applying for. Your cover letter is a great place to explain significant gaps in employment because it allows you to go into detail about how you used your time unemployed to prepare to return to the workforce. If possible, find a way to highlight how these gaps strengthen you as a candidate. Just like I mentioned earlier, a basic template for this is starting with the reason you were not employed, followed by what you did during the gap. As you might have noticed in my resume, I took a year sabbatical from 2016 to 2017 to travel across Europe and Asia. This experience strengthened my understanding of the market and its needs, and I'd love the opportunity to share those insights with you. I look forward to learning more about the position and your organization's vision for this role. Thank you for your time and consideration. Again, what a great example to provide insight into how and why the gap occurred, but also as a great conversation starter. So when the interview occurs, they're going to ask questions and you're going to have an answer prepared. Again, it's confidence and positivity. And once you get to the interview, employers are likely going to touch upon your gap if it is noticeable. Again, you want to follow some general rules. Be truthful, but brief. Explain why you're unemployed. Explain what you did during the gap. Stay optimistic about your return to work. Once you've addressed the gap and explained what you did during that time, steer the conversation back to your desire and the ability to do the job you're applying for. You can do this by asking a question of your interviewer once you've answered their question. Sometimes reasons for time away from work are personal and something you'd prefer to keep quiet. You don't need to go into detail about what caused your employment gap, but you should give specifics on how you spent that time. If the conversation continues in a direction you're not comfortable with, you have the option of saying, I prefer not to go into any more detail. I am very interested in sharing details about my work experience. However, from there, you can either supply another anecdote from your work experience that makes you qualified for the position or ask another type of question. If it goes further and you are uncomfortable, you may consider ending the interview at any time by saying, I'm not comfortable with where or how our conversation is evolving, so this may not be the right fit. Thank you for your time. That gives you a graceful exit, while at the same time being respectful to the employer and hoping that you can steer the conversation back on track at some point. Preparing to re-enter the workforce. The first thing you should do to explain employment gaps on your resume is to try to spend the time you were unemployed preparing yourself for returning to work. You can do this by using the time for professional development, such as earning certificates relevant to your industry, taking continuing education courses, being active in professional associations, and spending time doing volunteer or contract work. Doing this can help you give positive experiences you can use to fill employment gaps when writing your resume. This actually happened to me personally. About 5 years ago, I worked for a program that was federally funded. The program ended, the funding stopped, and I found myself with an employment gap of about 6 months. So I really used the time to do some contract work and volunteer experience to help me build that gap in my resume, to talk about the fundraising events that I chaired, to talk about the marketing committee that I was a chair for at my daughter's school. So those kinds of activities that, again, help you parlay that gap into workable experience for your next position.
Call on your network.
If you've built a network of professional contacts throughout your career, now is the time to use it. Reach out to people in your network and inquire about open jobs in your field and whether they would be willing to put in a good word for you with the potential employers. That's very important. Going into a job interview with the recommendation from a trusted professional in your field can help increase your chances of being seen in a positive light despite the employment gaps. At Goodwill, we stay in touch with our job seekers from 1 year from the date of employment. So once a month, our career consultants reach out to them either via text, email, or voicemail or phone and talk directly with them about how they're doing. Is it time to upskill? Is it time to look for new opportunities? If you're not currently working, can we help you re-engage with our network to help you find a job? So we constantly work with them on what it means to network for themselves, but we also start with our own team of networking within workforce development to help them in a time of need.
Ask previous employers to be your references.
Many job applicants ask for professional references who can vouch for your ability to perform the job that you're applying for. If you can list your most recent employer as well as other employers you've previously worked for as references, it will definitely show hiring managers that you still have a good relationship with these employers and did not leave or get laid off for negative reasons. And if the hiring manager calls your recent employer as a reference, the employer can explain to the hiring manager that you were, for example, laid off due to COVID. Our career consultants at Goodwill work with many clients to receive work readiness training and credential training for up to 6 months before they are placed in employment. We find it very, very fulfilling and important that we act as a character reference for them. So as they're starting their career, either in their first job or their next best job, we are acting as a character reference with our network of folks, vouching for them and helping them get that first opportunity to interview for a position. While having an employment gap can be challenging when applying for jobs, it's important to remain diligent if you aren't hired for the first jobs you apply for. Remember, employers are also trying to sort out the best steps to take for their business, so sometimes that can affect their hiring timelines. Set a daily or weekly application goal to stay on top of relevant opportunities, and then reward yourself in small, meaningful ways when you've met your goal. Stay patient and positive by taking breaks, practicing self-care, and investing in skill development as you search for your next best job. And of course, if you need more help with the transition or finding work, talk to your local Goodwill Career Center. Goodwills across the country operate independently, but all focus on some type of work readiness and employment opportunity. To find a Goodwill Career Center near you, check out these sites to find out how Goodwill can help. More than happy to talk with you further.
Text "Learn more" from Goodwill. As nearly all Goodwills have reopened, contact your local Goodwill to confirm Career Center hours. Goodwill.org/locator. Facebook.com/Goodwill International, Twitter.com/Goodwill International, Instagram.com/Goodwill International, YouTube.com/Goodwill Intil.
Thank you, Jenifer. So before we move into Q&A, I want to introduce my Indeed colleague, Anne-Marie Tucker, who has experience coming back to work after an employment gap. So she's going to be helping to answer your questions. Anne-Marie, do you want to give everyone a little background about you?
Sure. Thanks, Brandy. I'm excited to be here and participating with you all. I'm Anne-Marie Tucker. I work for Indeed as Associate Site Lead in our Austin office. I'm also a mom to 4 beautiful children who are now 14, 12, 10, and 8. When they were babies, I had the opportunity to pause my professional career in order to focus on our growing family as a primary caregiver. Fast forward to a couple of years ago, and I found myself ready to return to work, only now I had an 8-year gap on my resume. And so, as was just discussed, I had a lot of these questions and self-doubts. I didn't know how to address the gap on my resume. I didn't know how to value myself. Probably more importantly, there were things that I had questions about, such as, I really craved the flexibility that I had received and that would let me balance the needs of my family. But I was super hesitant to ask about those policies because I didn't want to seem less dedicated or less competent than other candidates. And so admittedly, my journey was pretty challenging, but I'm really proud of where I am today, and I'm excited to share the insights of my experience with all of you.
Thanks, Anne-Marie. So now let's look at some of the top questions that came in. So first, should I address employment gaps directly on my resume or leave that for the interview if asked? So we touched a little bit on this during the presentation. If it is a significant enough gap that you can't hide it or make it a little less obvious on your resume by just showing the year, then it probably is helpful to address it in your resume or cover letter, just so that employers aren't, just trying to guess at what was happening during that time. Okay, so the next one, how to explain a gap due to mental illness. Jenifer, have you worked with any job seekers that have that?
We have. We talked about a couple of those instances just this past week. And so what we were very open with is that it was a period of time where I had to seek treatment for, in most cases, again, I go back to the adage, I should have started with, I apologize, share what information you're comfortable with. I think you can address it very honestly and let them know that you had to take some time off to seek treatment. And if you wish to share that it was mental health related, you can. You can leave it at treatment and that you are now ready to go back to the workforce. You're feeling stronger than ever and you're ready to go. And I think that, again, it's only sharing what you're comfortable with.
Thanks, Jenifer. The next one here is, how do you explain a gap from COVID-19 for over 5 months? And as the poll showed, that's a situation a lot of you are dealing with, are a gap caused by the pandemic. And I think in general, everyone's going through this pandemic together. And so any explanation you give about, if your company downsized during the time or your industry took a hit, I think it'll be well understood by the employer, since they are seeing the current economy and the situation as well. Jenifer, Anne-Marie, have anything to add?
We have a lot of people who are applying for a few open positions that we have. And again, they're just being very honest about, I was laid off due to COVID-19. During the interview, anytime that you can offer the name and number of your past employer as a reference that they could call immediately, that speaks volumes to your integrity. And I think that would eliminate any concern that they would have over the elongated period of time.
Definitely. How do you know if an employment gap is causing you to not get an interview?
Yeah, I think this one's an interesting question because there's really no great way to know if it's causing you to not get an interview. One of the things that I did try to do is when I had the opportunity to talk to recruiters, if there wasn't a good fit, I often solicited feedback for why, to get an understanding if it was related to my gap, and so that I could make adjustments to my resume specifically that would help explain where they had doubt. You have to rely on getting those at least initial phone screens to be able to get that kind of feedback, but definitely ask for it so you can see how you can make the adjustments.
That's great advice. Thanks. Our next question, I was told that resume scanning software will eliminate you as a candidate if you have a gap that's more than 1 year. So should we list the gap as a job entry, for instance, sabbatical with an explanation, so that we don't get eliminated? To reiterate what Jenifer said during the presentation, that if what you were doing during that time can very clearly be put into expressing how that experience improved you as a candidate for the position, then I would say definitely put it on your resume. I'm not familiar with the fact that technology would weed you out if you have a gap of more than 1 year. I think that might not be true, just because people don't always include every job on their resume. But Jenifer, have you experienced anything like that?
I haven't. We work with a lot of big employers in Central Ohio, and to date, we've never been told by anybody that there would be something like that would occur. So I agree that if it's relevant skills to positions you're applying for, then I would enter those. If it's not, then I think I would mention it in the cover letter, but I don't know of any software that excludes you for that.
Good to know. So next question here. I am being told I'm overqualified, but I need a job and realize I'm seeking a lower role. How do I mitigate their concern? Any suggestions, Jenifer?
I have a good friend who's going through this situation right now, and so my advice to her has been this. Sometimes we are seeking life change, and that can be for a better balance between personal and professional. And I think you're honest with people and saying, it may appear that I'm overqualified. I'm looking for a new challenge. I'm starting over in maybe a different path. And I realize that there's going to be a learning time period where I need to learn and grow in the position. That's the reason I'm seeking something lesser of a role, and hoping that we can work together to make that happen.
I wanted to add to that because I encountered this as well upon returning. And I think that framing what you hope to get out of the specific role that you're applying for, so focusing on the positive elements of how you can develop in that role, even though that it may be lower, or you may be overqualified for it, that helps them to understand your commitment to that specific role.
So the next one here, how do you explain a combo gap? So due to layoff, sabbatical, and COVID-19. So likely, they were either laid off or took a sabbatical, and then COVID-19 hit and made it a lot harder to get back to work, either in that role or in a new role. And again, I think that's something that's unfortunately pretty common right now. And I would reiterate the advice of just being honest about what caused the gap, why you couldn't get back to work on the schedule that you had planned, but making sure that you make it clear that you've filled the gap and that you're ready to get back out there. Another question, how to explain a family leave gap of 5 years? Anne-Marie, do you want to take that?
Sure. Yeah, I think that Jenifer gave some really good advice in the earlier presentation, and I actually applied a combination of those types of things, particularly if your family leave was related to younger children. As Jenifer said, identify the things that you were doing that were valuable in that time. Similarly, I did a lot of volunteer work with my children's schools and was able to highlight those things that I were doing that were directly related to the fact that I had taken leave, but also showed that I was, helping in our community and things like that, showed demonstrable skills that contributed to my resume outside of the gap.
The next question here is, how can I explain a gap due to chronic health issues? I don't want to scare a new employer out of hiring me due to my health. That's a good question. Jenifer, have you dealt with that situation?
We have. We've had actually applicants who have come in with chronic health conditions, and they've been very upfront about the condition. They've talked through some of the reasons why they would have had that gap, explaining to some degree some of the medical procedures that would have caused them. Again, nothing in too great of detail, but just helping them to understand what you had went through with treatment. And then I think the other thing is just, as Anne-Marie had mentioned earlier, really putting your best foot forward and explaining how you are ready to go back to work, and just that you are ready, willing, you feel that you have received treatment and you're on the road to recovery. And also, you might even mention that your doctor has suggested that this is a great way to further your recovery, is get back to work to help with self-confidence and keep your emotions in a positive state.
Great tip. Why are gaps bad in the first place? That's a great question. And I want to be clear that gaps aren't bad as a whole. It's more just about being able to prove to employers that your skills didn't get stale during that time, that you were keeping up with best practices in your industry, and that you are prepared to go back to work, because after a period of time, you might be in a different mindset than you would be if you were going to the office or working from home on a regular basis. Anything to add, Anne-Marie, Jenifer, about your experience, with gaps yourself, and how that you could position that as a positive?
My gap was rather short 5 years ago, so I don't feel that there was a long enough time to where I was probably overlooked for something, but the question did come up in every interview. So again, I was brief, I was honest and to the point. From an employer's perspective, when I'm reviewing resumes, gaps don't necessarily scare me off from an applicant. I feel that I want to talk more to them because the skill set before or after the gap is consistent, and it really matches the job qualifications that I'm looking for. I want to have that conversation, at least a phone screen, to ask them the question and have them walk me through their employment history, and hopefully they address the gap.
Great. So many layoffs, applying several places, and they don't hire you for fear of salary. How should you deal when salary is lower than your experience? So I take it basically, trying to get back into working, and you have to take a pay cut. which is probably something a lot of people are dealing with, especially during the pandemic right now. Jenifer, do you have any thoughts?
I always ask the question in a phone screen, what's your salary range, so that we can have a conversation about what is realistic. And then I think in that conversation, walk through with them their expectations, what we're able to offer, and see where you can meet in the middle. I think if you're honest with an applicant up front, again, I think if they say it's lower than I was taking before, or received before in a salary, but I'm okay with that, and we have that conversation, then again, it doesn't scare me away from an applicant. And I think that it's a good conversation to have up front.
Thanks. And then I'll take one more question that we got via email. If during an employment gap you undertook some sporadic freelance work, is it better to put that on your resume rather than having a gap? And my take on this is absolutely, especially if the freelance work was in your desired field. It just shows that you are still using those skills and building your expertise and experience during that time. And it can probably help you during the interview, tell your story a little bit better to include that as well. Anything to add, Jenifer, Anne-Marie?
Yeah, I just wanted to agree wholeheartedly. I'm a big proponent of contract opportunities helping you to re-enter. I actually re-entered the workforce via a contract opportunity. And so I think that demonstrating those skills and showing that you were working and committed and contributing helps to mitigate a lot of the risk and concerns that people have with gaps. So I think you should absolutely include them, particularly where the skills are relevant to the job you're seeking.
I absolutely agree with both of you. It's a great point that, it shows a very dedicated candidate to pursuing, their interest in keeping their skills sharp.
Yeah, and just to build on that, actually, I would encourage people, if your industry is one where you can do that sort of freelance work in the meantime, whether it's during your gap, if you have the ability to spend time towards that, continue doing that work, even if it is just on a short-term or contract basis, or if it's volunteering, just being able to continue some element of that work will benefit you when you get back into the workforce. So that's all the time we have for Q&A today, but thank you for all of those great questions. If you found this Jobcast to be helpful, check out our other Jobcasts, and that's at go.indeed.com/jobcast. For the latest information from Indeed, follow us on social media. A huge thanks to Jenifer and Anne-Marie for sharing their wisdom today. And thanks for watching. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment below.
Text Jobcast by Indeed.